One of the features of the LabQuest2 is that it has built-in GPS, Global Positioning System, and it allows me to track where I am on the globe. And so I'm going to do a couple things with this. I'll do a run where I'm just going to walk around in the field behind me and collect some data. And then we'll go down to a stream and maybe make some measurements with a sensor other than the GPS and have the two things combined here. So it's a built-in sensor, so one of the things I have to do is to activate it. It doesn't default to coming on because you don't necessarily want it there. To do this, I go up under Sensors, and right here it says Sensor Setup. And so I go to Sensor Setup, and then here you'll see the list of the various channels here, and then you have the internal sensors here. And what I want to do is activate the GPS, and when I say OK, it's going to go to the meter here. And so right now it's trying to find the satellites, and so it's got latitude and longitude there, and it hasn't found the satellites yet. And we can know that we've activated this because if we look down in this part of the screen, you'll see there's a little globe with an X on it, and so that indicates that the GPS is activated and that it's currently trying to find satellites. And one of the things that can happen is it can take several minutes. If you've never used it before in that position or that location, it has to talk to all these different satellites, and it can take a little while for that to happen. Now, while I wait for this to locate the satellites, one of the things I would like to do is to change the contrast of the screen. Because we're outside in a sunny day, it can be a little bit difficult to see the screen, and so the LabQuest2 has the ability for a high contrast screen. And so I'm going to go here and go to the little house icon, and under the preferences, I need to go to light and power, and I want to change this to high contrast. So I do the high contrast mode. You can see the colors change there a little bit. I go and we go back, and so we're still waiting for the satellites there. While we're waiting for this to find the satellites, let's take a look at our default mode. It's a time-based, meaning right now it's going to look at the position as a function of time, 1 sample per second, and it's going to do that for 3,600 seconds, or that's an hour. And so if I hit start, it's just going to do a time collection of that. So it's now found our latitude and longitude. We have the signal there. I'm going to wait for it to get a little bit stronger. One thing that you can do if you're going to use this with students out in the field, if you want to kind of speed up the process, is that if you've ever been to that spot, maybe you're doing it around the schoolyard, you could go and activate it first and then let it find that, and then generally it will tend to find the satellites a little quicker. It's found us here, our latitude and longitude. I'm ready to hit collect, so I press the collect button, and then I go on a little walk. And I press stop to stop collection, and there we have the graph of my path. And we could take a look at our graph, and the default here is latitude versus longitude, and you can see my path as I walked around the field there. There's some other options when you do this, is that if you tap on the axis of the graph itself, you can see that you can do time, latitude, longitude, altitude, speed, direction on the various axes, and so I can change that if I want to. So maybe if I wanted to do a graph of, say, speed versus my time, I could do that. And it's kind of going up and down here a little bit. You know, as I'm going around, I may be moving the LabQuest in my hand, so when it actually gets the speed at that point, it may not be all that steady. And I'm not going all that fast, and so it's kind of jumping around there. But then I could go back and maybe, if I wanted to do latitude versus time or longitude versus time, I can do that. But of course, latitude versus longitude gives us the actual position where we are on the planet. So I mentioned two different use cases. We did the one where I walked around in the field, and now we're interested in looking at discrete points, maybe in this case along a stream. So we could measure our latitude and longitude with our GPS along with a sensor. And so we can do the two things, and so we can keep track of where we are when we do our collection. And like we did before, I've got to set this up. And so I've got the device running. I need to go to my sensor setup, and I'm going to have it activate the GPS. I'll say OK. And so now it's going to find where we are. It'll take a second to be able to do that. And what we'll see is that at first it's going to go to the same defaults that we had earlier, where it will be a time-based graph. But that's not what we want. And what will happen is when I plug in the temperature sensor, it's actually going to change the setting at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that in at this point. Now, if we look up into our upper right corner now, the default with this sensor connected is what we call selected events. And this would do our collection by event number. So if I went to one location, it would do a location, then I could go to another one, another one, another one, and it would be location 1, 2, 3, 4, and whatnot. I could use this, but there is a setting on the LabQuest that's really nice. It's called the data matrix. And the data matrix allows us to measure multiple sites on multiple days with multiple sensors and keep track of this matrix of data. And so that would be very appropriate for what we're going to do. So I need to go and change my collection mode to this data matrix. So to do this, I'm going to go to mode, and I go, instead of selected events, I'm going to do data matrix. And so right now it's defaulting to so site 1, day 1, and so I'm just going to start this and say OK. It'll automatically increment for us, and so I'm going to say OK. And so we've changed it to data matrix, and now what will happen is we make the different measurements. We can add different sites as we go along here. So I'm ready to make my first measurement, so I'm going to press collect there. So I press my little arrow just like we've always done, and what will happen now is that it moves over here and it says day 1, site 1, and so I'm ready to go here. So I'm going to take continue, and when I do this, I'm going to end up with my my meter here. And so in channel 1 I have my temperature sensor, and then over here it says latitude and longitude. And what will happen is if I want to save the value, I'm actually going to tap to save that value, and at that point it will actually make that measurement. So I'm ready to do that. So I'm going to bend down here, I'll take the temperature of the water, and it will record our location. So I'm just going to stick that into the water, and now I am going to tap on the meter to do that. So I tapped on the latitude and longitude, I tap on the meter for the temperature, and it is now saved that, and I am ready to go to another site. So I'll do change. I'm going to do add site, so it's automatically going to increment to site 2. And I do continue, and I will move on to another site. So I'm just going to walk down the stream, and so that way I can do temperature and location further down the stream. This one. So continue, and wait for that to stabilize. Latitude and longitude look good, they're stable. Temperature seems to have stabilized there. Tap the meter to do that one, change, and I'm ready to go to another site. And let's get this site here. Put the sensor in the water. Stick it in the gravel this time a little bit. Continue. My latitude and longitude look stable, so I tap the meter, that collects that one. Temperature looks stable, do that one. And now I'm done, and so at this point I can, that's enough for this one, I can hit stop. So we've come back to the lab from the river, and we have our data in our LabQuest, and what I wanted to do is to take it out of here and put it into the computer, into the Logger Pro software. Logger Pro is our software package for computers that allows me to do data collection. But it has an interesting feature in that it will allow me to export data to Google Maps if I have coordinates, which is what we have from our work here. So I have the Logger Pro software up and going, and I'm going to plug in the LabQuest via the mini USB cable that comes with it into that port. And when I do this, the computer is going to recognize there's data. And so it comes up here and it asks me if I would like to retrieve it. I'm going to say yes, and then I'll just say OK, and it's going to dump the data into the file I have open. And I end up with kind of a variety of graphs. It depends on what I've been using and how I've been collecting here. Some of these I really don't want to use, so I'm actually going to highlight the particular graph, hit the delete key, and get rid of those two. Let's see here. I like latitude and longitude, and I might want temperature versus, go down here and click on the label of that lower axis there, and I'm going to make it versus site. And so that way I've got that one versus site, and I might want to auto scale that graph. So I'm going to go up here. It looks like a graph with an A inside, so that'll auto scale that graph. One of the things that I can do is auto arrange, and this will just fill the page there, so you can do it under page. You can do auto arrange, and that just fills the screen with my graphs. And so I've got latitude and longitude graph on the top, and temperature at the 3 different sites at the bottom. Some things I could do, the lower graph, I might be interested in that being a bar graph, so I could double click on the graph itself. This gives me the graph options. Maybe I make that a bar graph. Say OK. So now I have a bar graph at the different locations where I collected data. Now, Logger Pro has the ability to export to Google Maps, and this will bring up the picture from space where I collected the data. So I'm going to go under File. I'm going to pull down to Export as Google Map. Now, my computer is connected to the internet right now, and so that have to be allow this to happen. Now, because I did different sites, the default here is it's coming up and it wants to show text markers, and so those will be displays on the photograph of where we collected the data. So I've got that checked, and it's going to show the 5 points that I did. At this point, I'm going to say OK. It sends the data out through the Vernier website and brings up the picture from space. I might choose to look at a satellite view of this. So there's a satellite view. I might choose to zoom in. And so there are the 5 places I collected data along the stream. If I came here and clicked on the markers, I can actually look at what the values are for those different points. And that's where it said show text markers, that's what it's asking me about. So at this point, I could look at those if I wanted to, put them away if I want to. So it's pretty nice to be able to do this when you're doing environmental work. It allows you to bring up the picture from space where you collected the data, so that you can learn some things about a situation that you might not know otherwise. We've seen a couple of use cases of the built-in GPS on the new LabQuest2. We did some data collection at time-based, where I walked around in the field. We saw the data matrix version where we collected some data along a stream. So those would be 2 common ways of doing this. So the built-in GPS on the LabQuest is definitely an interesting addition to the device, and we'd love to see what you can do with it.